All right, now we can all be seated. Well, we began a couple weeks ago a new series just through the summer months here of different lessons found in the book of Proverbs. It's my favorite book of all the Bible. I've been reading for decades, just a chapter a day out of the 31 chapters, and continue to find riches in it that have been life-changing for me. And so it is great fun to be able to talk about the various topics that are found in this book of Proverbs. So to begin with today, I want you to think about a time where you did something really, really foolish. And I'll begin with telling you my story. Well, one of them. So Colleen and I had not been married too long. I had been working and making a whopping $800 a month. That was gross pay. It wasn't even net pay. And I was about to start graduate school, and Colleen was cleaning houses to help pay the bills for that. And I came across a fella who had an investment opportunity that, boy, you know, we went to a introduction, a get acquainted meeting, and it was in a fancy setting, and it seemed all pretty professional and upfront, and it really had promise of a high return, and the buy-in for the investment was $2,000, which back in the day, that was a lot of money for the Tuggle household. I mean, that really represented my life savings. And I went and I actually talked to a financial guy about it, and he told me, he said, I've never heard of anything like this. I've never seen anything like this. I'm nervous. It has all the earmarks of being a scam. But I think because I was, just so struggling to make ends meet and feeling like I needed a break and, being a bit of a worrywart anyway, I jumped in. And I invested the $2,000 and then waited. And 2 years later, I was still waiting. And it was about 2 years later where I realized that the head guy of this investment opportunity is arrested because it's all a part of a Ponzi scam. And then it was over. I was out of the $2,000. Now, the good news in that foolishness is that I learned a very important lesson, and that is to run when you are introduced to any kind of get-rich-quick schemes. And I promise you, I've never made that mistake a second time. And so that was my story, and I suspect that you have a story or two as well. I mean, maybe it was during your crazy teen years. Maybe it was that thing you did on the spring break during college, or maybe it was that relationship that you stayed in, or maybe it was the relationship that you left, or maybe it was something that you said or did while really angry. Could be just about anything, but I'm guessing I'm not the only one who has a story or two of being foolish, right? Yeah. So when you look at the book of Proverbs, you'll find that second only to the subject of money, the subject of foolishness is mentioned more than all other subjects. It's number 2, second only to money. Now, today, what we're going to look at is this subject of foolishness. The word fool in the Old Testament is mentioned 114 times. And out of that 114 times, 70 times it's found in the book of Proverbs. And so that's 2/3 of all of the references to foolishness. 2/3 of all the references are concentrated in this book of Proverbs. Indeed, it makes sense, because if wisdom is the theme of Proverbs, which it is, then it's fairly understandable that the arch enemy of wisdom, being foolishness, would be a key theme. And so to begin with, let's look at some terms here. And then, after we look at terms, I'm going to give you 4 ideas that you can write down in your notes there that will help you to sidestep foolishness. So to begin with, let's look at foolishness defined. And here it is. Foolishness is the lack of wisdom that's expressed, and that's a key word, in our thinking, our feeling, and or doing, and it's something that's wrong. So put another way, foolishness is when we think something, we feel something, we do something that's simply not correct, or something that doesn't align with God's morality. And these wrong expressions, they could be something small, like just a slip of the tongue, something that you wish you hadn't said, maybe to your child or to your spouse, or it could be something big, like an extramarital relationship. The wrong could be, the decision to drink and drive. The wrong could be participating in a Ponzi scheme. But either way, whether it's a small wrong or a big wrong, anything that we think or feel or say or do that's not correct, the Bible refers to this as foolishness. Now, as we deep dive into this study of foolishness, the Hebrew language, which is an incredibly deep and rich language, we find there that the word fool, in our English Bible, there's actually 3 separate Hebrew words that represent the word fool, and those 3 Hebrew words all have different connotation, but they're all translated in our English Bible as fool. And so I want to take a look at those 3 Hebrew words. And so in a nutshell, here they are. Hold on. Here we go. The 3 Hebrew words translated fool. The first one is kasil, and this is basically defined as someone who is ignorant of right from wrong. Why am I switching here?
You're not switching anything, the signal's cutting out.
Signal's cutting out, huh? Okay, well, you guys can see it up above here. So, one who is ignorant of right or wrong. The word eval, it's actually pronounced eval. One who knows right from wrong and willfully chooses to do wrong. Or naval, one who lives a lifestyle of doing wrong. And you notice right away that in this Hebrew language, there's a gradation of the significance of that term foolish, beginning with the first one, kasil, which is somewhat innocent, and then moving to a more serious type of fool. So I want to look at each one of these 3 words a little bit more carefully. So let's look at the word kasil. Okay. Wow. This is nowhere where I need to be. I'm wondering if I got put on the last... No, that's not the right slide. And that's not the right one either. Yeah, something's okay. Okay, so let me just move on here. Kasil, defined as one who is ignorant of right from wrong. Psalm 94:8 says this. It says, "Take notice, you senseless ones." There we go. There we got it. Thank you, my friend. "Take notice, you senseless one, among the people, you fools," kasil, "when will you become wise?" And so the kasil is someone who is incorrect in their thinking, their feeling, or their behavior. And the explanation is that they're just senseless about what is right. Now, the most common illustration of this would be a child. Children by nature, they just don't understand why certain things are a bad idea. They don't get it, why it's a bad idea to put a fork in a power outlet, or why it's a bad idea to reach for a saucepan that's on a hot stove, or why it's a bad idea to run through the house with a sharp object in their hand. Children do these things because they don't know any better. That's the idea behind kasil. One of the most, I wish I could tell you that, it was only children who are guilty of kasil. But the reality is that it's actually true with adults as well. And a common phrase that I use in my counseling practice is, I'll sit down with clients and I'll say, okay, you've got to help me understand because this makes no sense to me. I'm confused. Boy, if I got paid $1 every time I said that, I'd be a wealthy man. And so, for example, I'll say, help me understand. This makes no sense. You know you have a spending problem. You know that you're in trouble financially, and so the way you cope with that financial stress is to buy more things on Amazon. Is that right? Or I'll say, listen, your spouse doesn't give you enough attention. You want more affection from your spouse. And so the way you hope to get that is by belittling and put downs of your spouse. That's how you're going to solicit more affection from your spouse. Or, let me see, I'm confused. This makes no sense to me. You want better behavior from your child, and the way you achieve that is by rewarding bad behavior. You get the idea here? And so, of these three Hebrew words for fool, kasil is actually the most common. I mentioned 70 times mentioned here in the book of Proverbs. 48 of the 70, which is 2/3, have to do with this fool, the kasil fool, somebody who just doesn't know better. And I'll give you a key verse in Proverbs that kind of depicts it so well. It really says it clearly, is Proverbs 8:5. O simple ones, learn prudence. O fools, learn sense. So as you see the theme there of, listen, stop being a kasil, learn some things, grow, get some education here. Wise up, learn wisdom and knowledge. It's your best hope to stop being foolish. So let's look at the second word now for fool. This is the word eval, one who knows right from wrong and willfully chooses wrong. Look at Proverbs 14:9. It says, fools, the eval, mock at the guilt offering, but the upright enjoy acceptance. Now the guilt offering mentioned in this particular verse is found in Leviticus 5, Leviticus 7, and Leviticus 14. It's different from the sin offering. The guilt offering mentioned here has to do with when you wrong your neighbor, the idea of making restitution to the one wronged. That's a Bible idea. That's really what the guilt offering is. It's going back to the one you wrong and in some way making restitution. And so what's being talked about here with the eval fool is that he knows that after wronging somebody, I should go back and make restitution. But instead of doing that, he mocks the idea of doing that. He knows what should be done, but he just doesn't do it. And I wish that all of our foolishness was of the kasil type, but let's face it, we all are guilty of the eval type as well. We know right from wrong, and we do the wrong, right? And those of you who aren't nodding your head, well, you're just liars. In fact, I have noticed this, that in our early days of following Christ, I made a lot of mistakes that really were of the kasil nature because I didn't know my Bible. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't really know right from wrong, at least from God's moral standpoint. And but as I've gotten older, I continue to be foolish, only now it's much more of this eval type of things where I know what's the right thing to do, but sometimes I just don't feel like doing it, and I'll do the wrong thing anyway. And apparently I'm not alone. Even King David was guilty of this. Here's a man who was described as a man after God's own heart. And yet he had the courage to write this about himself. He said, "Oh God, you know my folly, my eval, the wrongs I have done, and they're not hidden from you," suggesting that at some point he had tried to hide them. What's interesting here is that David doesn't really mention exactly what the wrongs are that he's referring to, but he is admitting that he tried to hide them from God. He realized that he was only fooling himself, that God saw all of the eval that was going on. He acknowledges his wrongdoing. He admits that. He knew what he was doing was wrong. It was not kasil foolishness. No, this was the eval type. So we have the kasil type of thinking, feeling, doing out of ignorance. We have the eval, which is thinking, feeling, doing knowingly. And a third Hebrew word for fool, and this would be the most serious variety here, this would be the naval, one who lives a lifestyle of doing wrong. And I intentionally chose this Proverbs 17 here. It says, he who sires or gives birth to or fathers a fool gets himself sorrow, and a father of a fool, that's the naval has a variety, has absolutely no joy. It speaks of a father who lives in sorrow with no joy because his child doesn't mess up out of ignorance, doesn't mess up every now and then out of stubborn foolishness. No, this is a father who has a child who just goes from one wrong to another, a child whose life is a train wreck, a child who leaves a wake of hurt and harm wherever he goes, whoever he's in contact with. This is a child who has nothing to show for his life, who goes from one disaster to another. It is the most serious type of fool. And we are given in the Bible what the ultimate cause of the Naval type of foolishness is. And it's found in Psalm 14. It says, the fool, referring to the Naval variety, says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is none who does good. The Nabal fool differs from the Kaseel fool, who doesn't know any better, who has no sense. The Eval fool, who knows better and generally makes pretty good choices, but occasionally has weak moments. No, the Nabal fool is one who chooses not to believe in God, who in no way places himself under God's authority, and hence becomes a free-for-all in their decadence. That's the Nabal type of fool here. Now, of the 70 times that fool is mentioned in Proverbs, this one is only mentioned 3 times. And I think there's a reason for that. And that's because for both the Jew and the Christian, this kind of fool is actually rare. I mean, in the world, I think Navals are a dime a dozen. There's plenty of them out there. But among God's people, our foolishness is definitely much more the Kaseel and the Eval type of variety. So quick review. 1 word for fool, 3 different Hebrew words. You kind of get the idea of how they're different. And these 3 types are revealed in the Old Testament, but they do have one common denominator, and most of it, I'm thinking most of you probably already see what the common denominator is between the 3 fools. And basically, it's self-sufficiency, where on occasion, when we're doing the self-sufficiency, what we're really saying to God, at least in the moment, is, I know better than you. Right? That's kind of what we're saying in our foolishness. That's the thing that, in fact, makes us foolish. And the Proverbs are filled with this concept. I'll give you 2 examples. Whoever trusts in his own mind is a fool, a Kaseel, but he who walks in wisdom will be delivered. So you see the trust in his own mind. And then another example would be the way of a fool, the Eval, is right in his own eyes. Again, you see that theme of, I know better. But a wise man listens to advice. And there are many other scriptures that could support this idea. And again, the fool is just really, the common denominator is in all 3 cases, we're just not listening to God. And if we're honest, I think we all do this from time to time in our life. So in the remainder of our time, I'm going to assume that, you all are familiar with the consequences of being foolish. I know I am. And so I'd like to reduce my foolish choices. I'm guessing you do as well. So it raises the question here of how do we avoid foolishness and instead choose wisdom? I mean, what are the practical things that we can do to be more wise? I mean, we all struggle with foolishness, and how we avoid these layers of foolishness, be it by ignorance or willfulness or even godlessness. How do we back out of the foolishness if we're perhaps stuck in it right now, even as we speak? What do we do? Well, the good news is that Proverbs just explodes with truth and understanding and help for us. So I want to today just give you 4 ideas to avoid foolishness. 4 things that have certainly helped me. I think they will help you as well. And because they are so practical in nature, these 4 things are also going to double as application points this morning as well. So I'm going to share these in what I consider to be the starting point is fairly simple, and they gradually become more challenging, become more difficult, if you will. This first one is really, it's kind of like if you think of baseball examples. The first one I'm giving you is like T-ball, man. I mean, this is just a ball set on a stick that's easy to hit, okay? You'll find that the last one is definitely a fastball in the major league, but we're going to start off slow and have some fun with this, okay? So idea number 1 is to seek knowledge, especially God's knowledge. Pretty simple. This is especially helpful for Kaseel foolishness. There's times when after a dumb decision, we say to ourselves, man, I should have known better. Well, maybe not. But boy, I'll tell you, when you look at Proverbs 13, it says, all who are prudent act with knowledge, but fools expose their folly. And so the point is pretty evident that, if you want to stop making poor choices, get some education. Get some better understanding. Conceal foolishness, I think, is actually legit the first time. I wouldn't hold it against my children for putting a fork in the power outlet the first time. But if they do it a second time, now we got a problem. Okay? I know for me, I made the decision at 16 years old that I was going to become a student of the Bible. I just had the notion, the idea, the reality that this was something that I certainly needed. I had the humility to admit at 16 that I was a bit of a knucklehead, and left to my own thinking, things were not going to go well with my life. And so I gave myself to this book, and I could tell you, it's made me wiser as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a Christ follower. It's been extremely beneficial. I often say that the greatest fringe benefit to my counseling career really is this daily experience of gratitude for the wisdom and the knowledge that God has given me about doing life. Because every day I have this front row seat of watching conceal and evow take place, and I'm just watching it. And while on one hand it's heartbreaking as I work with people who are going through the tough consequences of their conceal or their evow, on the other hand, I'm also like, Lord, thank you that you've given me understanding, you've given me wisdom, you've shown me how to do life. And so I urge you, Living Hope, if you're struggling spiritually, relationally, financially, in any way, seek out knowledge. It makes a difference. Okay? Idea number 2 to avoid foolishness is slow down and practice non-reactionary responses in your life. Look at Proverbs 14:16. One who is wise is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is reckless and careless. That word cautious, it actually means fearful. The King James Version actually uses that word fearful. One who is wise is, the King James says, feareth. And what's he fear? Turning away from evil because of the fool being reckless and careless. There should be a natural inherent fear about doing stupid stuff is kind of the idea here. And so the idea is also that when our buttons get pushed, when we're triggered and instantly become angry or hurt, we do well to slow down and to postpone how we're going to respond to the moment, to not be impulsive at that time. There's a God-given fear that we should all have to our reaction, because we know inherently that if I say or do something right now in my upset, in my anger, I'm going to actually be making matters worse. And I don't want to make a difficult situation even more difficult by my reckless words at this point. Unlike the fool who recklessly and carelessly goes off, a wise person slows down and will take time to calm down and maybe even reflect a little bit of what a wise response to this moment is. And if you're wondering about how to find a wise response, my go-to question, I don't always practice it, but on good days I get this right, where if I'm upset, I shut up, I do what I got to do to calm down, and then to figure out a wise response, to do the slow down thing, the calm down thing. My go-to question to help me with that is, what response best serves the cause of love? And this is based not on the golden rule. We're all familiar with the golden rule that we should love one another as we would want to be loved. I base this on the platinum rule. And the platinum rule in the New Testament is that we are to love one another as God in Christ has loved you, which is even more challenging than the golden rule. That's where I get this question from. And so that's what, once I slow down, this is what when I'm thinking about a wise response, I'm thinking about what's going to best serve the cause of love. And honestly, I've never found it appropriate to let someone have it and that really serving the cause of love. That actually just becomes a setup for having to apologize when I let someone have it. Okay? So I should also mention that if you're a passionate person, anybody here that would describe themselves as being passionate? Okay. So let me speak to you for a minute. Being passionate, I got to tell you, being married to a passionate woman, I can tell you that for the most part, man, it serves you well to be passionate. I mean, spouses of passionate people feel very, confident that they are loved and that they are loved well. And also with a passionate partner, man, you never have to guess about where they stand on issues. I'm never confused about where Colleen stands on anything. She passionately speaks out on whatever, Passionate people are usually, go-getters in terms of getting the ball rolling to accomplish certain tasks. So, being a passionate person, 9 out of 10 times serves you well. But the 1 out of 10, there is a downside for passionate people, and that is the tendency to do the ready, fire, aim approach to life. Ready, fire, and then aim. And so you as a passionate person, you have to be extra careful asking the Holy Spirit to help you to avoid adding sorrow to insult by hasty, careless, reckless reactions to things that upset you, to things that trouble you. When I finished grad school, beginning my practice in the late 80s and early 90s, it's interesting that what had long been held in the psychological community was now being studied from an empirical standpoint. And in those empirical studies, what was looked at was that our cognitive control and our adaptive emotional self-regulation, they both stem from the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Now, that's been known for a long time, these two brain functions, prefrontal cortex coming from the same area of the brain. But what was proven is that when people become angry or upset, their cognitive control becomes maladaptive, and the ability to self-regulate emotionally becomes impaired. And when those two things happen, the cognitive part, basically being able to organize your thoughts, being able to have a clear, cogent thought, if you will. When angry and upset, that part of the prefrontal cortex kind of gets sidestepped, and the ability to emotionally self-regulate, to be able to think through of, okay, hey, Barry, take a deep breath, watch yourself, don't say anything stupid right now or whatever. That self-regulating that we do, most of us unconsciously, that gets bypassed in the prefrontal cortex as well. And so we just go off, and what the study and research shows is that when that happens, at that time of upset, our IQ has actually dropped by 20 points. Which now you know why you say and do stupid stuff when you're upset. Because you're actually stupid at that moment. All right, let's move on. Avoiding foolishness. So we've got seeking knowledge, slow down and practice non-reactionary responses in your life. A third idea is to, how about this one? Stop hanging out with other fools. Proverbs 13:20, this is my life verse. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffer harm. Simply put, maybe the trouble in your life is because of the advice you're receiving. It's possible. This is an interesting word, companion. It's the idea of two people who are actually being yoked together, who are walking in step with each other, or trying to walk in step with each other. It's in our modern day vernacular, it would be a description of two people who are doing life together. Okay? And the way that God has wired us is that by image of God stuff, people influence people if they are doing life together. It's just a part of being made in God's image, that we are influenced by one another. And unfortunately, it's not just good influences of others, the bad influences get onto one another as well. And I have to say here that I'm actually a big believer that if you're a Christ follower, you should have people in your life who are far from God. I'm so thankful that I came to Christ because when I was far from God, there were those who walked with God who took me under wing and who were a friend to me. Friendship evangelism, if you will. Loved me just where I was, as Christ loved me right where I was. And took the time to hang out and to be a friend and to do stuff together. And so I'm big on that if you're a Christ follower, you should have some people in your life who are, far from God. But I do think that we need to recognize that the wisdom of some of these friends is not right or correct wisdom, and we do well to recognize that. We do well to recognize that, we may have these friends far from God who are making foolish choices, have goofy thinking, and so we just need to be careful with that. For sure, we do need the wisdom of God in every area of our life, in our relationships, in our family, our ministry, our finance, our health, you name it. We need the wisdom of God. And God has delegated others to be a conduit of that wisdom. And so, that's what Proverbs 13:20 is telling us. Walk with the wise, become wise, but the companion of fools suffer harm. We just need to be careful with that. Make sure the influences in our life are wise people. And then finally, and here is our fastball, and this is by far, I think, the most challenging one, and that would be to listen to tough and difficult advice. Proverbs 15 says, "A fool rejects his father's discipline, but he who regards reproof is sensible." And so here's the thing about discipline. Discipline is definitely unpleasant. I don't think anybody goes looking for discipline. I don't remember any occasion where any of my 3 children, when I had to, when they had messed up and were in a little bit of trouble, I don't remember any of my kids ever saying, Dad, I messed up and you haven't issued any discipline yet. Bring on the discipline. That's the ball's now in your court. Let's do this, Dad. I have no memory of my children ever doing that. Now, discipline, it's never looked for. It's never asked for. It's not celebrated. But I don't think I need to tell any of you what becomes of a life without discipline. I think about Bradley's life, he's already a pretty disciplined young man, but he's going to have a double dose of discipline over the next few months here, and that's not going to hurt him none, okay? Then this word reprove, it's an interesting word. It simply means an act or expression of criticism. An act or an expression of criticism. And so Proverbs 15 is telling us that a fool is one who won't accept criticism or correction. A sensible person is one who does accept those things, who does accept the tough and difficult advice. Now, I know this, you've heard me say this many times, that whenever we give advice to somebody, when they're not asking for advice, people are always going to hear that advice as criticism. And by and large, 99 out of 100 times, they're going to become defensive at that point. One thing I love about the culture of Living Hope is that, we're not running around, giving a bunch of unsolicited advice to each other, because we understand this principle that if I just give you some advice and you're not asking for it, all you're going to hear is criticism. And so, on the one hand, walking around giving advice isn't particularly helpful. On the other hand, it's hard to grow when you've got these blind spots. The people around you can see it, but you can't see it in the mirror. And so it presents a conundrum, where we need reproof, but reproof from just anyone isn't going to be helpful because of the defensiveness that will likely come up. And so here's my best suggestion for that, is that we all need to appoint a friend, somebody who knows us enough to see our blind spots, and somebody who loves us enough to speak God's truth to us regarding what they see that we may not be seeing in ourselves. And in fact, what we're doing is we're giving permission for another person to reproof us. And in doing so, that reproof is no longer uninvited. It's no longer unsolicited. It's actually, you've given that person authority to speak into your life if they see a way that's going on in your life that's not becoming, that's not healthy, that's not doing the cause of love any good whatsoever. I know this. I've got blind spots. You've got blind spots, but the people around us can see these things real clearly. So my thought about how we get around this is that you find somebody who you appoint to be that person, to point out the things that need correction. You know, a reason why I liked the verse that we're talking about here about the father's discipline is because implied in this is that the father has a authority to discipline a child. And I think in the body of Christ, we give others authority to reproof us if we actually call them to that and ask them to do that. Now we're giving them the authority to do that. And so that's how we sidestep the whole defensiveness thing. Listen, I've observed over the decades that some people walk around, they think they've got the gift of reproof, you know? Meaning that they're just quick to point out anything in another person's life that's wrong. Quick to point out any word that doesn't quite square biblically. Well, you know, the Bible doesn't exactly teach that. You know, just so quick to point out those kind of faults. Ironically, what I've also observed is that these people who are so quick to point out the fault of another, they're strong in their ability to point out other people's wrongs. Similarly, those very same people are very weak when it comes to receiving a reproof from another person. In other words, they can dish it out, but they don't receive it so well. Yeah. So, there's no question we have blind spots, things that are difficult to see in the mirror. But at the same time, the family of God, hey, we shouldn't be running around like a pack of fault finders. I don't want our church to be that way. Far better that we just, each of us, give authority to someone to help us with the things that we can't see, to give us the permission to reprove. Okay? So there it is. Here's our 4 ideas. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list to avoid foolishness, but I promise you, it's a darn good start. You know, you get these 4 things going on, you'll be well on your way to less foolishness of any variety and more wisdom in your life. And like I said, they're also practical. I'm just going to use those as my application points as well. But as I sometimes do, every now and then I have a message where the points are so practical, they really become the application. And so when that happens, I like to have us all pray together. I usually construct a prayer, and today is no exception. And I want us to pray this together. So let's close by having you stand. And out loud, we're going to pray this together, phrase by phrase, okay? All right, here we go. Father, thank you for your wisdom you so generously give me. Forgive me for the times I have failed to embrace your wisdom. Forgive me for the times I have been foolish, both by ignorance and willfulness. I confess that in these instances, I was declaring that I know better than you. Lord, I ask for your power and presence to make my life characterized by your wisdom. Give to me a hunger and thirst for knowledge of your word. Help me to no longer react impulsively and to slow down when upset, to consider a wise response to my difficult moments. Give me eyes to see the influences of my companions. Help me to walk with the wise and be cautious around the unwise. Father, I admit I have blind spots, areas of my life that need correction. Thank you for the people who love me enough to speak your truth into my life. Help me to be receptive and not defensive to their reproof. Thank you that my future days will demonstrate less foolishness and more wisdom. In this, thank you that your name will be glorified and my life enriched. And everyone said, Amen. Amen. Amen.